Hello, I'm Nathan Hartman, and this is Dreamfinders, a podcast about the creative culture of Disney theme parks. It comes as no surprise to most Disney fans that YouTube has a plethora of theme park content. Want to relive Maelstrom at Epcot? You can, plus learn all its history. Want to see the evolution of Mickey's costume? It's a click away. But generally, most of this content is strictly educational. And then there's Tony Goldmark. Tony has gained notoriety primarily for his long-running series, Some Jerk with a Camera, which mixes facts and opinions to discuss everything from Captain EO to Steve Urkel. That's right. Don't you remember? Family Matters went to Disney World. But unlike so many other Disney-based shows, Tony films the majority of his videos in the parks, sometimes under the watchful eye of Disney security. Tony was nice enough to sit down with me to chat about his experiences filming on location, how that Family Matters episode turned into an 8-part TGIF Goes to Disney epic, and that one time he was an extra in a Weird Al music video. All that and more is coming right up on Dreamfinders. Tony Goldmark, welcome to Dreamfinders.
Thank you very much for having me, Nathan.
So before we dig deep into all the cool Disney-related work that you've done, let's first get a chance to know a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from San Francisco and born and raised there till I turned 18. For some reason, I went to college at Columbia College in Chicago. Still not exactly sure in hindsight why I did that. I think it was just like, it felt like all my internet friends at the time were in the Midwest, so I wanted to go there. But then after college, or about a year or so after I graduated college, I moved to LA, and I've been here ever since.
So your background seems steeped in a love of a couple things. We'll talk more about each of these. But I would say two that come to mind right off the top is comedy and music, and even specifically comedic music. What is your background with both? Did you have a comedy background growing up, a love of certain comedians? Were there music choices that you preferred? Where's your creative background?
It's a rich tapestry, to be sure. My parents are both musicians, which is probably where the music side of it comes from. My dad is a huge record collector and is a manager and co-owner of Amoeba Records, the California record store chain, one of the last few record stores in existence. And my parents were both musicians. They both played in bands a lot. And so I received a very formative musical education from a very young age. Never learned to play an instrument, though. They tried to teach me how to play piano, but I just never took to it. So it just never happened that way. But my real love just for me was comedy growing up. Like I was always a nerd. You're shocked, I can tell. But I was never into the traditional nerdy things. Like I didn't really get into Star Wars much as a kid. Like I saw Star Wars as a kid, but I didn't really get into it until like high school and college. I was never much of a gamer. I was never really into superhero comic books. Nowadays, I'm really into superhero movies, but I was never really into the comic books. But but my nerdy, geeky passions, which I indulged all the time, which were every bit as intense for me as any other geeky passion when you're a kid, for me was twofold. It was Disney and comedy. It was like I was really into Disney and animation and the theme parks and all that stuff. I was a huge fanboy for all that. And I was also a huge comedy nerd. And in particular, to this day, I remain a massive, massive Weird Al nerd. And a nerd and a huge fan of comedy music in general and Dr. Demento and all that stuff because it combined both things. And what I loved about comedy music was, you didn't have to rely on one or the other. Like if a song wasn't so great musically, but it had some great jokes in it, that could save it. Or if a song just wasn't that funny, but it was a really good song, that could also save it. So it was like So I liked that aspect of it. I like the juxtaposition of it. I like that's what I always loved about it. Now, there are a lot more bad comedy songs than good ones. I'll be the first to admit that. But it was just one of those things I always loved, and I love discovering that it's a whole genre. Like there's this guy, this DJ named who calls himself Dr. Demento, specifically plays all this kind of disparate novelty stuff, because you're not really trained to think of comedy music as a genre unto itself, in part because, unlike in a way, it's the only true genre of music in the same sense we apply genre to movies and TV shows, in that it captures a tone as opposed or it captures it describes what you're trying to do. It describes what emotions you're trying to pull off, in this case, laughter. Whereas every other type of music seems to be, well, if it's a song that's played like this musically, then it's a blues song, or if it's played like this musically, then it's a country song, and it's and I love all that kind of music as well, but it's like a comedy song can be in literally any genre, so to speak, and that's another thing that appealed to me about it. I mean, you listen to the typical Weird Al album, and it's like 12 different songs in 12 entirely different musical styles, and so you got that variety going for it. And now, like I said, my parents were musicians, and because they were musicians, they knew a lot of musicians, and they were very, very indulgent to a fault, particularly my mom. And when I was literally 12 years old, she thought, hey, you know what'd be fun if my son recorded an album? And we just, now part of the issue, and this is something that I've only very recently kind of come to terms with, I really can't sing all that well.
Better late than never, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I've released like 5 albums, and listening back to them, oh, I can't sing. I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's, they were always fun to do. They were always fun to put together. It was fun to, send them to Dr. Demento. And because my parents knew not only musicians, but also, people who owned their own recording studios in their basements and stuff, but it was always fun to put them together. It was always fun to send them to Dr. Demento and get my stuff, played on the radio back when he was still on terrestrial radio. And it was fun to be, included on the year. Every year he would release a new fan club CD. And I think like 5 years in a row or 6 years in a row, I had one of my songs on there, which was really nice. And a couple of my songs even became big Funny Five favorites. I had the third most requested song of 2003 and the second most requested song of 2004. Never quite got to number 1 and never will, since I've kind of decided that part of my life is behind me. But I guess, you never know.
What was the second one? The
second most requested song of 2004. That would be okay. You don't really know where these ideas come from, but I decided I should, when Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the movie, was coming out in 2004, I decided I should do a song about Sirius Black to the tune of Baby Got Back.
I was wondering if this was going to be the one. Yeah.
Yes, that was I don't know. I don't know why it worked. I really don't, because I do think I actually produced something pretty memorable. Like someone made a fan edit of that song, a fan video just with clips from the movie, and it got like something like 500,000 views on YouTube, which is one of the most viewed things I've ever for a long time, until I did the Nostalgia Critic co-review last year. It was easily the most popular thing I'd ever done. It came the closest to going semi-viral of anything I've ever done back in 2004, and I even kind of worked that into when I eventually reviewed the Wizarding World of Harry Potter at Universal Hollywood. I kind of worked the fact that I had done that song into the episode, so you can watch that. But yeah, that came that was a pretty big hit on Dr. Demento of 2004, and I didn't think it would be. I was thoroughly amazed by just how much attention it got.
Now, are most of your parody work, is it more along the lines of, say, versions of other people's work, Weird Al, like Spike Jonze style, or did you do any sort of original kind of music with original lyrics, Tom Lehrer style, or things of that nature?
Oh, I did. Most of my songs were original, but every now and then I would do a parody, and that was one of them. But nowadays, and by the way, when I say original, like I say, I can't play an instrument, so it was always a matter of like, meeting up with my dad and kind of figuring out the song with him. and figuring out like what the chords were, because I always had it in my head, but I don't know how to notate or anything like that. So I basically got my excuse for a record career solely due to nepotism, but hopefully
don't worry, you're not the only one.
Well, yeah, but you get it that way first, and then hopefully, you're good enough to live up to it, I guess.
Now, something sort of connected, but also dealing in video, and also weirdly connected, mentioned many times, shows up once in real life, and then other times via clips throughout your YouTube series. You had the opportunity to work on a Weird Al video. You were paparazzi in Perform This Way. How the heck did that come about?
Okay, this was 2011. This was for his Alpocalypse album. It was the big lead single. And his record label had kind of stopped throwing big budgets behind music videos by then because, the cable channels weren't playing them anymore. And yeah, you could get it on YouTube, but frequently it was harder to make money off that. Yeah. And it was just, no one was buying albums anymore. Essentially. So, the labels just stopped throwing money behind music videos. So they kind of had to cut corners whenever possible. And one of the ways they cut corners was asking for free extras on Al's website. Essentially, he did this for the White and Nerdy video too. 5 years earlier, he basically just said, we need a bunch of extras willing to work for free, but you get to be in a Weird Al video. Send a photo of yourself to this email address, which we'll only have for the shoot. And I did, and I got in. Now up to that point, I had been, Al knew who I was. He was aware of my existence. I had performed at four actually, Weird Al conventions up to that point. And I knew his drummer, and I sometimes managed to get to go backstage at his shows, and I met him about a dozen times up to that point. So he was aware of my existence, and I know he wanted to get, some of the harder core fans in on these things. And yeah, I played a paparazzi. You can actually see me in the video to the left of the screen in the shot where the Weird Al Lady Gaga CGI hybrid creature is walking towards camera, kind of straight ahead, looking into the lens with like the Taj Mahal on her head and I think tentacles around her, something like that. It's crazy. But I'm off to the left, literally as some jerk with a camera, so yeah. Appropriately enough, and I'm just yelling at her and snapping pictures and everything, and that was a fun day.
Now, is Weird Al the nicest human being or the nicest human being?
He's pretty nice. Especially to his fans. I think he realizes that, without his fans, he wouldn't have had the career he's had. So, it's very, I've never seen him be impolite to anyone in real life. He's just so cool. He's awesome.
So we sort of mentioned it just a little bit, but I want to get back to it and talk about the nerdy Disney parks factor of your life. How did that passion begin? And since you were always in California and that sort of thing, was Disneyland a part of your upbringing? Did you find yourself there often, or was it more of a wishful thinking sort of thing?
I went to Disneyland a lot. Yeah, every year, usually just with my mom. It wasn't really my dad's thing, but we'd always drive down. We'd always stay at the Disneyland Hotel because my mom liked being able to take a monorail back to our rooms for a nap midday. That's a nice luxury. But yeah, I just fell in love with the place from an early age, and as a teenager, I kind of went through Disney sucks, it's all stupid phase, like you do when you're a teenager and you think you know everything. But I eventually came back to it, and it was nice, and of course the Disney movies. I came of age during the Disney Renaissance and all that, where it was just starting to be just absolutely everywhere, and you couldn't escape it. And I liked it, and I really got into it. I remember getting a couple of really big, extensive Disney coffee table books, like The Art of Walt Disney and stuff like that, and just reading them cover to cover and getting fascinated by everything. And even managed to convince my family to go to Disney World a few times in Florida when I was a kid, even though we had California right there. But and then I kind of rediscovered it about when I was in college, and just never gave it up. It was it's just been a part of my life ever since.
Now, some people have a passion and they talk about it over drinks and that sort of thing, but it's rare that someone takes their love of something and not only makes it a YouTube-like series, which people do, but makes it a really elaborate, complex, multi-episode at times, production. So this is, of course, Some Jerk with a Camera. Your
Right.
big, and it wasn't even it was before it was YouTube. It was Blip, right? Was it?
Yeah, it was on Blip for the first 4 years or so.
Okay. So, what's the origin of that? What makes you decide to take on starting? I mean, you get more complex as the seasons go, and it seems like you sort of kind of figure out your foundation and what your kind of vibe is going to be with the show. But even those initial episodes, what made you say, like, this is something I want to invest a lot of time in?
Well, I had the time to invest, which was always a big help. But I came to LA in the hopes of trying to write for TV or something, and for the first couple of years that wasn't really happening. And I was always a big fan for years of a web series called The Nostalgia Critic, which was on Blip, and he had his own website, thatguywiththeglasses.com, and there were other contributors to the website, and they did these sort of review videos, which were mostly filmed at home, but very much. The Nostalgia Critic did this sort of thing, which was kind of MST3K, but in the sense that he would take a movie and just make fun of it, but he would actually show clips from the movie and interrupt it whenever he had a joke to tell or an observation to make, or just a criticism to make of it. And he'd do sketches about the movie. And then also he'd cut over the parts where he had no joke to tell about it, where he'd just say, so this happens in this, he'd kind of cut out all the boring stuff. And it was very much a sort of DIY thing, which always appealed very much to me because I hate taking orders. I love giving them to myself and forcing. I mean that's not that fun either, but it's better than taking them in the first place. But But like I said, his site had a lot of contributors, and I basically wanted to be one. And I thought, well, no one's really doing theme parks right now. There were people doing these types of videos about movies and comic books and video games, and like I said, I never really got into comic books or video games, and movies were kind of taken. There were enough people reviewing movies online, and I thought, no one's doing theme parks. And the great thing about doing theme parks is that you can do it on location at the theme park in question. Mm-hmm. You can't really shoot a movie review in the movie theater because they'll notice your camera and think you're bootlegging. But it's so with Disney, I thought doing reviews of Disneyland at Disneyland, you can use a lot of show don't tell. You can actually record these things in the very locations you're talking about. You can kind of your location can sometimes be the joke in general, and you can just edit it together so you're hopping all around and it doesn't really matter if the journey even makes sense, because also it's a comedy show and I'm not taking myself that seriously. And it just all the first couple episodes were very much just me doing a Nostalgia Critic type video in Disneyland, but I always thought don't be limited by your influences. You should always have influences, but don't think, well, he never did that, so I shouldn't do that. No, do it. If you've got a fun idea of how you can make this even better, and it's feasible, just go for it. And that was always my philosophy with Some Jerk as a Camera, was just to make it uniquely me, just make it uniquely something that I would create, that I would like. And, weave in all these elements of, it's part Nostalgia Critic and part kind of Al TV special that Weird Al used to host, and part like Paul F. Tompkins monologue, and part video essay, and part YouTube poop. I just like bringing all of those elements together and just mixing them up and seeing how it works.
And this work is really, as I was kind of saying earlier, steeped in showmanship. I mean, it goes beyond sort of the normal, typical vlog.
Well, thanks.
I mean, clearly it does. Right. And why is that important to you, though? Why put in that extra effort when you can do? And you said like some of your inspirations were more in-house, vlogs. There's a lot more work involved, on location. In general, did you find that there was a reason beyond you certainly mentioned commentary about the places you're in, but the showmanship element, did you want to bring the YouTube, I guess the blip audience, something that they didn't have?
That was a big part of it. Yeah, I remember there was a video that The Onion did a few years ago. I want to say like 2009, where the joke was YouTube will give a special award to anyone who puts any effort into a video. And it was just a commentary on how every video on YouTube was just someone talking to the camera, and there were no cuts, and they would just talk about their lives or about some movie or whatever. And it was very kind of, bottom basement, just no effort whatsoever thrown into it. And I never wanted my videos to be like that. Now, unfortunately, just due to how much time it takes to make these damn things, I have created a couple of other smaller vlog series which are more like that. Mm-hmm. I do this series called One Movie Later, where we watch current movies in theaters and just talk about them. But even those I edit to a fine point, and I try to rearrange our footage so that we're talking in more or less a straight line and not digressing so much, and that takes time to put together, more than a typical vlog would. Basically everything I do, I always try to have a little sheen of showmanship to it. Like, even if it's just a vlog where we're talking, I like it to have the most showmanship that a vlog that we're just talking can have. And I've never been all that confident in my raw abilities as a performer. And, it's better when I can edit. So why not edit? Why not put a little more zazz into it, I guess?
Yeah. And another element that you lean on strongly, and I think it does bring, I don't even want to use the term sitcom-y because I think that's wrong, but you have other people that show up and are a part of it. You have relationships with these people throughout your show. And in that way, you're not like this.
That's called friends.
Right.
Nathan.
I hear that's what they're called. I'm not really sure what that's all about. Right. I'll have to read a book about it.
Weird concept.
But,
it's a new form of cryptocurrency. I don't know.
Oh, well, interesting. I'll have to invest. Yeah. But the thing that's interesting about that is a lot of YouTube videos, as you say, are, just one person solely in their study or whatever, and they're not interacting necessarily with too many other people, exceptions being probably the Green Brothers and a couple others. What was the desire? Was it just to hang out with friends? They were going to hang out with you anyways, and you needed people around, so you incorporated them. But the thing is, these people also have their own shows. How did you network that all together? Was it just, hey, come and let's do this thing, or did you sort of met people along the way?
A lot of it just kind of happened organically, and a lot of it directly as a result of me doing this show. I mean, when I first did the show, when I first tried it out, I didn't really know anybody. I've never been that great at making friends, and I had to corral someone I barely knew, who I knew from like the Weird Al fandom, to help me with the first couple episodes. And but then through making those first couple episodes and posting them to the That Guy with the Glasses forums, I managed to meet a bunch of other people who were doing these kinds of videos, and we've become friends for it, ever since. And we share similar interests, and they're just really good people. And sometimes it's literally just as simple as, if you've got a bunch of people you like working with, you want to work with them over and over again, and you want to keep working them into things. And if they have their own shows and we can maintain some sort of crossover continuity, even though the continuity really doesn't matter as far as, what happens when or whatever. It's basically just a bunch of shows, and it's just an excuse to work your friends into things. but I've always loved the idea of that because, no man is an island, and this other world full of other people. I've never understood someone who just won't collaborate under any circumstances. I guess I kind of understand that you don't want to, like you want to keep your vision pure or whatever, but it just, I don't know. I just think it's more interesting to bring other people into it, I guess, if that answers your question.
Yeah. In the series, you play the titular Jerk. How is Jerk different than the real you?
He's funnier. I mean, I know it sounds like a joke, but that's kind of it. It's just, it's me, and you take all the aspects about me as a person and just cranks up what makes them funny. And, if I have to be, if I have to be completely oblivious in a scene, Jerk will just be oblivious. And if you've got to be loud and angry for a scene, Jerk will just be loud and angry. And it's just whatever I need from the guy, I guess.
So you film large portions, as we said, in the parks. What sort of planning does that take? Clearly, you're not just going in and shooting willy-nilly and saying, okay, what can we get of this? Things are very planned out. Jokes are specifically for certain locations, that sort of stuff. Take us through that process of coming up with a single video. What does that look like for you?
Well, first of all, in addition to the official Some Jerk episodes, I do some vlogs whenever something new opens at the park, and I'm kind of experiencing it for the first time, and I just want to get my initial reactions. And I always rope friends into it whenever I do that. But those are always off the cuff. We just go to the parks and we just, we think up jokes as we go. And when we think of something, we're just like, oh, camera on me. And, that can definitely be a fun video, especially if you add jokes in editing. But it wouldn't. It's not how I would want to make my main Some Jerk with a Camera series. It's a whole other beast to get altogether. To make an episode of Some Jerk with a Camera, you've got to. I start with a concept. I start with, okay, what do I want this episode to be about? I do some research into it. If I'm reviewing a specific movie, I watch that movie and jot down notes. If I'm doing it on a ride, I, look up as much footage and as much promotional material and as many behind the scenes stories and, everything I can find about that ride or about the history of a certain theme park. And I do research and as I'm doing all this, I just keep writing notes. And if I think of a funny idea, I follow it down the rabbit hole of whatever, funny ideas I can think of. Eventually, I assemble all those notes into a script. And once I've got a really solid first draft with a beginning, middle, and end, that's like, okay, this could be the script of the finished episode. Then I start filming it. And now sometimes, like if I know I'm going to Florida or something, and I've got to have the scripts finished by a certain day so that I can shoot them while I'm in Florida, then I kind of have to work backwards from that and make sure I get all the scripts finished in time. But once I know I'm about to shoot, I then adapt the script into a shot list, and the shot list is based entirely on, okay, how do I not double back on myself too many times? I arrange the shot list solely by location, and it's like, okay, these shots I need to get in Main Street, these shots I need to get in Adventureland, these shots I need to get in Frontier, etc. Whatever I need to shoot and whatever we need to shoot them. And also if they involve other people, it's like, okay, well, Charlie's got to be in this shot, so we got to make sure to shoot that on a day when he's going to be at the park. And this shot involves Dave, and Dave has to leave early, so we got to get that shot earlier in the day. Whatever we need to do, I arrange it. It's basically like a jigsaw puzzle. I arrange the shot list and I do it, and then we shoot them. And when I'm shooting, I always get way too many takes because it's better to have too many takes than not enough takes. My first 2 seasons, I used a flip cam, which is this outmoded piece of technology. It's basically like a small brick-shaped camera, which basically just has a lens, a view screen, and a red record button, and that's pretty much
it's
it.
very much of its era, very much so.
Very much 2011, very early 2010s, but it shot in HD, so I was like, okay, I'm a filmmaker now. I have an HD camera. That's what I thought. Now the problem with flip cams. Now, if you've got the right color effects in your post-production, in your editing software, you can actually make flip cam footage look pretty good. The problem is the sound, because the microphone is like this little tinny thing. If you watch my first couple seasons, any shot where I'm actually where I'm talking into the camera and the audio just sounds like absolute garbage, it's because it was a flip cam. It's because I didn't have as good equipment as I would later. In between my second and third season, I decided to upgrade to a Canon camera because Canon makes the best internal mics. And I knew I wouldn't be able to get away with an external mic. I wouldn't be able to get away with a mic that you kind of hook up to the camera, because the equipment cannot look too professional. It needs to fundamentally look like just some guy and his friends just goofing around in the parks. Now, of course, these days, now that vlogs about the parks have become a lot more commonplace, I think Disney management and Disney security kind of realizes, like, okay, this is a phenomenon. This is not going away anytime soon. If we try to clamp down on it, we'll just look like the bad guys. So let's just let it happen.
Yeah, there's 4K on your cell phone now. It's like near impossible to know what people are doing.
Absolutely. So but anyway, so I got this new HD camera in I think 2014, and it shoots HD. The internal mic is pretty good. It almost sounds like I'm talking now into a Yeti mic. So because I spare every expense at some jerk with a camera, but but anyway, what I've been getting to is a lot of times when you shoot, especially when I shot with a flip cam, the audio would either just sound terrible, or there'd be so much background noise. And this still happens to me every now and then. There's so much background noise that you just can't understand what I'm saying. And in cases like that, I ADR it later in post. Now, so there's that. And sometimes just to save myself time, I will like shoot a shot twice, like once with me. Well, once I actually shoot it, and then I shoot it again with my mouth really close to the microphone to make sure I get it. I get it good. But and also, this is a tip for those of you shooting on location. Check the footage immediately after you shoot it. Make absolute sure you actually got a usable take, because so often this especially happened with Charlie a couple of times when he made his videos. Like, he would get the shot and he'd like, okay, let's move on. I would say, don't you want to check that? He's like, it'll be fine, and then it wouldn't. And you'd have to reshoot later. And it was just, you always gotta make absolute sure on the day before you move on to your next shot. So anyway, so we get all that at the parks, and then I come home and I start editing it. And the editing process is laborious, and like I say, it involves a lot of ADR in shots where you can't understand the audio. And part of the reason why my show is so good is because I really do sweat the details on my show to a pretty insane degree. Like, if you were a fly on the wall and you actually saw, all the sheer effort I put. This is why it takes me so long to release videos as well. It's just I'm just constantly, futzing over the little details of, oh, I could have said that syllable a little better. I say it like 10% better in this other take. I got to move the syllable. Oh, now it doesn't match because I was saying that syllable in a different key. Well, now I got to re-record the whole thing. And it just, all this to just to fix a problem that probably no one would have noticed. But that's just kind of who I am. Like, if I didn't, I guess I do that part of it for me. And eventually now the other part of it is, and this always happens when I'm doing some jerk, I always think of more jokes while I'm editing. I always think of more things, and I'm like, well, you know what? I'm not really under a deadline with this, except when I am. I don't have a boss telling me I can't do this. Let's do some reshoots. And I always, and very often I will, go back to once I have enough, once I have, at least a good page or so of shot lists worth of new things to shoot, I will go back to the park and shoot them all and then rework them back into the episode. I did that a lot, especially on my ABC retrospective, which is why I keep switching coasts, because I shot a bunch of material in Florida for it, and then I kept thinking of jokes while I edited it in California, and I couldn't just go back to Florida to reshoot. So it's like, well, I'm stuck on the coast I'm on. So what are you gonna do?
Let's say there's a 15-minute episode. I think you have some 15, 20. I'm trying to think what the longest one is. It's below 40 usually.
Right.
I'd say let's go average 20. How much editing hours does it take for that 20 minutes?
Oh, I've never counted, because I've never tried to count, because it would just take me so long. But literally, like, I think the quickest turnaround I've ever had for a video, and honestly, this was literally from concept to upload, the quickest it's ever been is a month. For a proper Some Jerk episode, and that was for something in the first season. So, I always, and that also had that was my Halloween episode in the first season. And I only was able to release it that fast because I knew, well, it's a Halloween episode. I got to get it out before Halloween. So, yeah.
So you mentioned, of course, that you've had some instances in the park, things of that nature. And I think this deals with, if you've not seen any of the videos, and I highly recommend them, there's a lot of pratfalling and goofiness and yelling that, like, once if you know production at all, like, some of it is fake yelling that gets ADR'd later, just to not scare everybody. Right. But
yeah, that's always what I do, by the way, if I need to yell. If you ever see me yelling at the park in a video, it's never me actually yelling. It's always me going like this, and it looks like I'm yelling. But then later in post, you add the actual loud voice, and that's how it works.
Yeah, so never fear, people. If you have social anxiety about such things, it's all movie magic. But at the same, you have all these, like, all this goofiness. And my question was, do you worry about unwanted attention? But I think you have circumstances that you certainly can, and stories that will, explain how close the calls have come.
Unwanted attention is certainly a factor, and I always try to allow for that. I try not to do shots that will. I try not to attract too much attention. Now, for the sake of comedy, sometimes you need to do things that will attract attention no matter what, and that's led to some amusing scenarios. I one time, and this is actually in one of my outtake specials, but there was one instance where I said some joke that mentioned the word orgy, and I wasn't even saying it in a literal context. I was saying it in, like, this is like an orgy of bad decisions or something like that. It was some weird thing, and we were sitting on some table, I think in Toontown, and next to us, there's this family with a dad and a couple of kids. And after, like, the 20th take, like I said, I do way too many takes. The guy just kind of started yelling at me, "Dude, don't say orgies in front of my kids." And it's like, dude, would your kids have even noticed if not for you yelling at me? Don't you have to explain even more to them now? It's like, I don't get it. But the closest we came to actually being kicked out of the park. Now, occasionally we have been asked by security, especially in the early days, what are you doing here? You're not a production, are you? We don't allow official productions here. Of course, now, with the proliferation of YouTube and vloggers and all that, it's like I said, they've kind of learned it's impossible to police that stuff. So, yeah, and as long as we're not breaking any other rules, they'll pretty much let it slide. But one time when we did come close to actually being kicked out was when I was shooting with Kyle Kalgren. He and I did a co-review for his show Brows Held High of Jean Cocteau's La Belle et la Bête, his original Beauty and the Beast from 1946, as a musical review using parodies of songs from the 1991 Disney Beauty and the Beast. And we recorded a lot of it live at Disneyland, or on location at Disneyland, rather. Now, to record it, Kyle brought the same camera that he used. He might still use it for all I know, that he used everything for, which was this big, bulky, professional-looking camera that he spent like thousands of dollars on. And it came in this enormous like backpack with orange lining and everything. And it looked every inch like a piece of professional equipment. It was, yeah, and there was no way it looked like anything else. And that attracted Disney security attention because they thought, are these guys shooting another Escape from Tomorrow? Or do we have to worry about this? And eventually they told us, we're going to have to ask you to stop shooting. And if we see you shooting with that camera again, we're going to have to ask you to leave. Now, they didn't take our camera. They didn't take our footage. They didn't actually kick us out. They just gave us the ultimatum. We went back to Kyle's hotel room last night. We kind of rewrote the script and said, okay, let's get rid of that scene. Let's get rid of that scene. Because we'd actually written a couple of bits that were even more attention getting, which we immediately cut and we rewrote into something else. And we just made it like, how much of this can we get away with shooting outside the parks, like at the hotels or at Downtown Disney or something? Yeah, we probably overcorrected in that regard, but basically the next day we went back and shot with my flip cam, and they didn't bother us security didn't bother us for the rest of the trip. So yeah, what I learned from that was you got to look like an amateur. You don't have to be an amateur, just look like one and you'll get away with it.
And I would certainly say you're not an amateur, especially when you come to your, man, I know, like an 8-episode epic, as you mentioned earlier, TGIF retrospective, which is the majority of season 2 of Some Jerk. For the audience out there, this may be one of my favorite fan created Disney things ever. I mean, it's very thought through and funny, and it weirdly admires TGIF as much as it sort of like bemoans it. And you mention even in the videos how this thing kind of got a little bit out of hand from the initial idea. So what happened?
Yeah. Well, I was just, brainstorming ideas of what I could possibly do at season 2. I knew I had a Florida trip coming up because which I specifically took so I could shoot a 3-part retrospective. I didn't know it was 3 parts at the time, but a 30 years of Epcot retrospective, because this was 2012 and I was going there at the time, and I thought, well, I want to shoot something else besides just the Epcot retrospective. And I thought, well, what else could I do? And then I remembered, hey, remember back in the 90s when like every sitcom did a Let's Go to Disney World episode? Like Full House did it, Family Matters did it, Roseanne, Step by Step, Boy Meets World, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Blossom did one for Disneyland in California. But basically these 6 ABC shows, and this was right around the time Disney bought ABC, oddly enough, all these shows did these really crass episodes, which were blatantly just Disney World promotions, where the characters are like, hey, let's go to Disney World this week. And I just thought, what if I just reviewed all those? Because, those are bound to get attention. People still have nostalgic, people still have a lot of nostalgic fondness for those shows. I can get a lot of easy mileage out of those kinds of jokes, and it'll be fun, and it'll be easy. It's always easier to review a movie or a TV show or something than like a ride, because with a ride you actually have to find the footage everywhere, and that can be a bit strenuous sometimes. But when you're reviewing a TV episode, hey, all those shows have been, or almost all those shows have been released on DVD. The ones that haven't, I can find bootleg somewhere, and I can and you make it work. And there's 22 minutes worth of footage to cull from in every half-hour episode. So I thought, well, that'll be easy. And I had no idea how difficult it would be, because like I said, and at first when I had the idea for the episode, I thought, well, like I'll probably devote a whole video to Full House, but like I can do a video on Family Matters and Roseanne, and a video on Step by Step and Boy Meets World. I don't have to do a separate episode for each of these shows. And it turns out I did, because like I said, I just kept thinking of more ideas, and the episodes just kept snowballing. until every one of these videos had to be every one of these videos had to be on a separate sitcom episode. And it eventually became this 8-part behemoth that took up easily more than a year of my attention. And but you know what? I got some great stuff out of it, and some of those episodes remain to this day some of my favorites, so I can't really complain.
So your work is known, of course, for being about Disney, but refreshingly so, I would say. It's rather un-Disney in its use of profanity, blue comedy, etc. I mean, it is about the parks, but it doesn't hold any sort of bones about being, very blue. But that's what I think is interesting, and as something that I think is unique about your show. As a follower of yours on Twitter and social media and things like that, I know you've had backlash from some in the community about that. Why do you think that is?
Again, I mean, I know this is going to sound a little arrogant, but I do think it's just kind of people getting limited by their influences. And it's like, oh, well, Disney never swears, so you shouldn't swear either in your videos. And it's like, well, I mean, I understand that I'm not going to change the world all by myself, which is kind of why I've kind of learned to accept, okay, maybe don't swear so much.
So you started out on Blip, and then now they're available on YouTube. And, since sort of you've created and started creating some jerk in your videos, Disney YouTube has evolved and grown and become this sort of larger monster than I think it first was.
Absolutely.
Is Disney YouTube, for lack of a better term, oversaturated? Do you think there's still more that can be done with the topic, or are we hitting a limit?
Well, honestly, my problem with a lot of Disney YouTube videos is my problem with a lot of YouTube in general is there's just not a lot of creativity to them from what I've seen. Now that's a very broad statement, and I don't apply it to every show. So if you're listening out there, I probably don't mean it about your favorite Disney YouTube show. And I'm not going to name names here, but you watch some of these and it's just so dry. It's literally just like, here is what happened and here is the story. And there's no point of view behind it. There's no perspective of like why this was good or why this was bad. There's no like emotion in the story to it. And it's like, why wouldn't you add that stuff? Why wouldn't you add a little bit of showmanship? Like, I don't know. My shows are entertainment shows kind of disguised as video essays and reviews. I like to think, and I always try to work in as much of that stuff as possible, because ultimately a YouTube show is still a show, give it some showmanship. I have no problem with this becoming a bigger topic. I mean, if anything, it makes, it definitely puts more eyeballs on my show, because because there's more shows similar to it that people are already watching, some of which have quite a few more subscribers than me, which is but what are you gonna do? I don't know. I guess I don't mind it being oversaturated, but one of the, I guess, side effects of it being oversaturated is that too many of these shows are just not terribly good. You
have also done multiple episodes on Universal Studios. I think that's quite a bit of, I would say, season 3, correct? Of Some Jerk.
That's right.
Sometimes you're loving on a ride. That would be something like The Simpsons, and other times you're being rather perplexed by the existence of others, like Shrek 4D, which remains here in the Sunshine State. I have no idea why.
Well, it's a swamp, so Shrek wants to be
I suppose it works that way. What are your thoughts on Universal in general? And is it what's its place in the theme park world?
This is going to sound like the most pretentious thing ever. It's going to sound like, this is going to sound like something a baby boomer would say, basically, which is why I apologize for saying it. But, and I said this in my Back to the Future, the ride video, but it's actually the best analogy I can think of. Disneyland is the Beatles, Universal is the Rolling Stones. It's got a lot less variety and a lot less innovation, but a lot more attitude, and it feels more dangerous even if it isn't. It feels a lot riskier even if it isn't. Part of that is just because they make fun of Disney at every opportunity, and that honestly gets a little tiresome at points. But Disney would not build an entire land devoted to The Simpsons.
Right.
They would not.
Though they can now.
Well, yeah. That's oh god, that's scary. But Universal, I do respect that Universal has a lot of rides that specifically make fun of the theme park experience, though sometimes that can get a little obnoxious after a while. And Universal, like, the quality varies like crazy. Some of the rides and attractions they've got are just amazing. Others considerably less so. I feel like they spend a little too much of their time trying to not be like Disney than trying to be their own thing, which is to their detriment. But ultimately, they definitely benefited from the era in the late 90s when Eisner was just firing everyone, and there were mass layoffs at Imagineering, and all those people went to work for Universal Creative, and they brought some of their ideas with them, and Universal, because there's less bureaucracy there. And there's much more of a sense of, well, we're never going to be number one, so let's just try to be the best we can. You get a lot of cool, funky stuff. Like I describe in my Harry Potter video of how Disney just treated J.K. Rowling like garbage. She had all these ideas of what a Harry Potter land should be, and they were like, well, that's nice, Miss Rowling, but we're Disney and we're the best in the business, so you can sign with us or not, and because we don't need you. And they would not have put the money or resources, behind Harry Potter the way Universal has. And Universal, took that risk, and it yielded them tremendous dividends, in part because they really had nothing to lose. It's like, well, this is the biggest franchise in the world, and as long as we remain true to J.K. Rowling's vision, she'll basically let us do whatever we want. We're gonna get a lot of money to do this. Let's just go for it, and it worked. It was, and Disney. And I think Disney took a lesson from that. Like, I know when Islands of Adventure opened in '99, a lot of people at Imagineering were genuinely hoping it would be a big hit. They were genuinely hoping that it would actually give Disney a run for their money, so that Disney, because they knew Eisner wouldn't have been able to resist the pissing contest. He would have immediately greenlit all this new stuff and then when Islands of Adventure underperformed, Eisner said, okay, we don't need to try that hard. We can just, keep on doing crap like, Sounds Dangerous with Drew Carey, and that'll be enough.
Did you approach Universal episodes differently than Disney ones when you were creating them? Does the satire come from a different place?
In a sense, I guess not. Well, in the sense that part of season 3 involves this arc that some jerk has walked away from Disneyland seemingly forever because he's felt betrayed by the mouse. So now he's just going to review Universal attractions. But otherwise, I basically approached it like I would approach anything else. I just, I would experience the thing that I was reviewing and just try to think of as many jokes and as good jokes as possible for it. And that was that. And by the way, that eventual now I'm happy with where that arc led of jerk not liking Disneyland, but it was really limiting, because it's like if I wanted to go to Disneyland for a joke, I had to, think of some story excuse why jerk would be there. It was so much more freeing to do the Harry Potter episode and kind of go back to Universal and do that after all that crap was done, because then, okay, if I need to go to Disneyland to illustrate something, I can just go to Disneyland and it's not an issue. And, so that was fun.
So currently you're working on One Movie Later and a blog news show called State of the Parks. What else is in the works for Tony Goldmark?
Well, I'm hoping eventually, at the moment as I speak, there's a few videos that I need to finish before I do anything else. Because I've already promised that I would do them, so I kind of need to do them and get them over with before I can move on. But once I've finally moved on, I do need to finally finish my season 3 outtake special. I know it's been at the time you hear this, it'll be it'll have been 2 years since season 3 ended, and I still haven't finished the freaking blooper reel for it. But that's partly because without spoiling anything, the outtake specials, like I said, I always put way too much showmanship and way too much stuff into everything I do. And the outtake specials have kind of evolved into a beast all their own. And I'm doing something even more elaborate for the season 3 one, which I keep having to put off because I keep having to make these other videos. But hopefully I'll get back to it pretty soon as of this speaking. And once that's done, then I can finally go full steam ahead on writing and producing season 4, which I don't know that much about at this point. I've got a couple of rough ideas for episodes I want to do. All I know for sure is that it's definitely got to involve another Florida trip because it's been way too long since I was last in Florida.
Well, Tony Goldmark, thank you so much for being on Dreamfinders. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's it for this episode of Dreamfinders. I'd like to thank Tony Goldmark for being my guest, and make sure to check out his shows, Some Jerk with a Camera, One Movie Later, and State of the Parks on his YouTube channel. You can also follow him on Twitter at Tony Goldmark. Our podcast artwork is provided by JP Tanner. Find his other work at tanwoodcreative.com. This podcast is distributed by WDW News Today, the worldwide leader in Disney Parks news. Read all they have to offer at WDWNT.com. Dreamfinders is hosted and produced by yours truly, Nathan Hartman, who you can follow on Twitter at Some Stuff I Said. Tell your friends about the show, and please give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. It really means a lot. Also, if you or someone else you know would make a great guest on this program, feel free to email us at dreamfinders@wdwnt.com. I'm Nathan Hartman, and remember, if we can dream it, then we can do it. Dreamfinders is sponsored by Never Grow Up Vacations, the official travel partner of WDWNT.com. Never Grow Up Vacations specializes in trips to Disney destinations around the world, so be like us and never grow up. Head over to nevergrowupvacations.com to book your next trip today.